Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I'm here with Nancy Cavey. Hi, Nancy.
Hey, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much. So, Nancy Cavey is a dedicated attorney with personal insight into the challenges of disability claims, inspired by her father's battle with leukemia. Licensed in Florida and DC, she represents clients nationwide, advocates for fair treatment, and has authored consumer-friendly disability guides. Amazing. So, what made you want to get into law?
Well, what made me get into law was the fact that my father became disabled while I was growing up. He was a World War II veteran. He was a John Wayne type of guy, diagnosed as having leukemia when I was in junior high school. And I watched him make this difficult decision to continue to work until my senior year of high school. And at that point, he really understood that he could no longer work. And the family owned an insurance brokerage business in Baltimore, Maryland. He had had the foresight to purchase a disability insurance policy, hoping that if he became disabled, he would have this policy as a way to provide for his family. So the day I graduated from high school, we moved from Maryland to Florida. He stopped working and he applied for not only his disability insurance benefits, but his Social Security disability benefits. And I saw the fight that he had to get the disability benefits that he had paid for in terms of his insurance benefits and the Social Security disability benefits because he had contributed, like we all do, to the Social Security system. So he was my inspiration to become a lawyer.
Well, good for you. Isn't it amazing how when you see somebody have to struggle through, you want to solve that problem for him, and you see people who struggle with different issues, and immediately it gives you that fire within you to want to help and make a difference. And I assume you certainly are making a difference right now, so I'm sure he'd be very proud.
Well, thank you.
So watching him in high school, I'm sure was pretty traumatic. Your father being sick and dealing with everything that he had to deal with medically, but, also trying to care for the family.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our lives were turned upside down. The things that I did was I actually graduated from college in 3 years with the hope that he would see me graduate, but he died several weeks before. Before I graduated, but he knew I was going to law school. And that was enough for me to know that he knew that I was going to try to make a difference in people's lives, just like he had made a difference in people's lives in his business.
Absolutely. So I can relate to this a little because my when I was married, my husband at the time, we had a young child, and he was diagnosed with stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. So just watching someone you care about struggle with an illness, but also, especially when it's kind of that man of the house and, they still feel this duty to care for their family. It's heartbreaking, but you see incredible resilience through it as well.
Right. Yeah. It's a journey not only for the person who is ill and is seeing the change in their identity, their role within the family, but then you as family members become resilient and do what you have to do to try to keep the family intact, but also not to be chained, if you will, to what's happening, so that you can see there are things that you can do, but there's a limit as you can do, and you at some point have to move on with your life, and that's what they would want you to do, and that dichotomy can be tough.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I love that you're out there fighting for people who have disabilities and have Social Security claims because it can be daunting for someone who goes into that system or that process and having to fight through all the bureaucracy. So I assume it is no small task for you to combat that on a daily basis.
That's my job.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that's going to be tough. So tell me some of the things that you love about what you do, and what tell me some of the great cases that you've been able to get good resolution for.
Well, I think my job is first and foremost to be an educator.
Hmm.
Educate my clients about the disability claims process, be it a Social Security claim, be it an insurance disability claim, because I want my clients and the public to understand what are the elements that you have to prove. How do we go about proving what we have to prove? And so that's why I've written a number of consumer books. That's why I have a podcast called Winning Isn't Easy, because I think education is really crucial. And then
Yeah.
there's the teamwork element, because I can't win a case without the cooperation not only of my client, but of their physicians. So I love medical legal issues. I like to look at a set of facts and say, well, this is what I have to prove, and this is how we're going to go about proving what we have to prove, and this is the process. Do I have your agreement as to how we're going to go about doing this? Because once we, if you will, reach an agreement as to how this case is going to go down and how I want to deal with the things that might be thrown at us during the course of the case, then I'm out there basically, I kind of think of myself, if you will, as I'm a bit of a playwright. So I take this scenario, I write the play, how it's going to unfold. I
Mhm.
direct it, and in part, I'm an actor, but I'm also directing my clients in terms of how we're going to go about trying to get their benefits, and be a guide, if you will, for them. Because my job, as I see it, is not only to educate, but it's to help them get the disability benefits they deserve while they are dealing with their personal circumstances and their medical situation. Having been in that place, I understand that that's where their attention and their focus should be, not on the legal aspects of what's happening in their lives.
Right, right. So do you find it's becoming more difficult, or do you like I'm just curious because of course we're with everything happening with United Healthcare and all the insurance companies right now, there's a lot of doctors coming out and talking about how difficult it is to get approvals lately. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a quick education. The employers will offer employees benefits. They don't have
Yes.
to. But in
Hmm.
the United States, that's generally governed, if you purchase it through your employer, a law called the ERISA statute, Employer Retirement Income Security Act. It's a law that was written by the Congress. Rules and regulations were enacted, but courts have interpreted it. And there is
Hmm.
a horrible case in the health field that basically says that the insurance company has the discretion to make the decision about entitlement to benefits. And it's quite frankly very hard to get through the appeals process. Worse yet, the only way I get paid as a lawyer is if you were to hire me and pay me, and I know you can't pay me because you can't pay the medical bill, or potentially the doctor assigns me their benefits. But there are anti-assignment clauses in
Hmm.
most insurance contracts that prevent a doctor from assigning their rights to their fee to me so that I can afford to handle it.
Wow.
And so this is unfortunately in our political environment a situation that should be resolved, but we've got the countervailing forces of the insurance industry, and we have
Mhm.
the politics that go with the world, if you will. So
Right, right. It just seems wrong that an insurance company who are not medical professionals get to determine what medical procedures are valid.
well, so the the disability insurance companies, the group health carriers will have doctors on staff, nurses and staffs. I call
Mhm.
them liar for hire physicians.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
They're there. not to approve claims, but to deny claims and to create a reason that would justify the claims denial. So in the context of a disability insurance claim, there are things in the policy called a discretionary clause that says we, the insurance company, have the right to choose who we're going to believe. We can believe your doctors, we can believe our doctors. And by the way, if we create all these reasons that justify this claims denial, you, the court, have a set of golden handcuffs, and you're not legally entitled or allowed to reverse our decision. So in the context of ERISA disability or ERISA group health benefits, we are on an incredibly unlevel playing field, and that can be solved on a federal basis by the Congress to say, hey, by the way, we're going to prohibit the use of discretionary clauses. We are going to require or allow lawyers to be paid a fee for litigating these cases. Now, there are state laws that prohibit these discretionary clauses, but there's no there's no uniformity. California prohibits them, Illinois prohibits them, Florida allows them. So part of the thing I do as a lawyer is I look at that insurance contract and say, well, what state law governs? Well, geez, it's Florida. I'll use a legal term. We're screwed.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, maybe I have a cause of action there that we can sue. So this lack of uniformity in what's supposed to be a uniform statute, again, is a problem that could and should be solved.
The state to state, that's one of the things that makes the United States great is that we have, states that can make their own rules and regulations in some cases. But then when you have different rules in different states, it does become very complicated. And everything from, I own a security company and our security licensing is different from state to state. Alcohol laws are different from state to state. Legal, state to state. And so even just crossing a border, into one other state, we operate in 7 states, and that's 7 completely different sets of laws, 7 completely different sets of regulations. And you almost need to be full-time focused on making sure that you're in compliance in that particular state. So it's very challenging.
Yes, it is. It is. Now, the Social Security claims process is a federal, also ultimately federal, but it's got more uniformity in terms of the rules and regulations. But nonetheless, even in the Social Security world, there are a number of problems in disability determinations. It's taking where you live as long as 3 years if you have to go through the entire claims process.
3 years?
Yeah, which is absolutely outrageous. So again, a problem that could be solved both on the state level and the federal level. An initial Social Security claim and a request for reconsideration is decided at the state level. The funding, however, comes from the state legislatures. And there are many states that will not adequately fund the staffing so that you have people at Disability Determination Services, DDS, who are making the decision timely. It takes a year in Florida after we file a claim to get a claims examiner assigned to the claim.
Wow, really?
Really. So if state legislators really were interested in helping people who were disabled and who had contributed to the Social Security disability system, they would fund in their state budget appropriate funding for the local Social Security offices to hire and train claims representatives so that these claims could be timely adjudicated. I mean, it's hard for me to say to a client, and I have this conversation every day, by the way, if we have to go through this process, you may not have a source of income for 2 to 3 years.
Wow. And after they've paid so long into Social Security. And I mean, that's one thing that, so I'm Gen X and we think about it all the time. Like, will there be anything left? Will there be anything left for the millennials? Like they keep dipping into Social Security, which was supposed to not be a source for the government to be able to use to allocate to other things. It was supposed to be just for Social Security. And, we're all worried that that's not going to be the case when we need it one day. And I guess making it so difficult is a way that they're kind of ensuring that those funds stay there. Is they're just going to make it really difficult to get it in the first place.
And it's going to, potentially get worse. So
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know what's going to happen with the with everything that's happening with Social Security and insurance, but I feel like we're coming to a kind of a come to Jesus kind of moment where things are going to have to change because it's gotten so bad and it's become, so controversial that I just don't imagine we're going to be able, people are going to have to, they're going to rise up against this.
Well, there's got to be a will. Uh,
Hmm.
and more importantly, we have to have responsive legislators from both parties, from all
Yes.
parties, who recognize that that Americans have contributed, for example, to the Social Security system.
Hmm. And it's
You,
required. It's been our whole lives of working.
so it's not like we're getting something for free. It's we have contributed to this system. And I will tell you, in my many years of practice, maybe a handful of cases I really thought were, bogus or fraud. And of course, I wouldn't represent them.
Sure.
But for someone to say, you know, I've lived my life following the golden rule, if you will. I've contributed to society. I'm a breadwinner. I'm proud of who I am. And now, for reasons that aren't my fault, I have a disability and I can't work anymore.
Hmm.
For them to come to that decision to say, I need help, and then to face the gauntlet, I think is awful. I think Franklin Roosevelt once said that the measure of a society is how they treat the disabled.
Yes.
Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's how you treat those who can't, give you anything back. I always say that that's the measure of character, right? Measure of character is doing something for someone with absolutely no expectation in return that they're going to be able to do something for you in return.
Yep, because it's the right thing to do.
Right. That's integrity and character. Yeah. So yeah, it's shameful what's happening. But I don't know that, as much as we talk about the United States being so awful with insurance and Social Security, I don't see it getting any better anywhere else. I mean, I hear, I have some friends who live in the UK and they were telling me some of the horror stories in the UK about their system. And, their taxing right now is astronomical.
Right. I mean, obviously, there is no quote unquote perfect health system. And
Right.
as you know, healthcare is expensive. And so it will take a significant part of our GDP if we're going to provide healthcare, a universal healthcare system. I don't
Hmm.
think that's the answer. All I'm saying is that there should be a level and fair playing field.
Exactly. Yeah.
To me, that's the issue. If my employer offers insurance, as I do to my employees, then I want them to have a level playing field. So if they need those benefits that I'm paying for,
Mhm.
that they get fair treatment and they get the treatment that they require without all these games and emphasis on profit and shareholder return.
Absolutely. I mean, like as an employer, healthcare is one of my biggest expenses. I mean, when we're providing benefits for our employees, I wanted the best plan possible for them. So, I mean, it's a very low deductible, it's a great plan. It's something that I really shopped hard to find the right plan that would not, be financially hard on anyone else. So we pay a lot of money for insurance, and I just got, feedback this week that one of my employees is getting denied for a necessary surgery. And I'm like, but why? Like, it doesn't make sense. We pay a fortune for this.
Well, for
And
what it's worth, you should be on the phone with your agent yelling and saying, would you, because there's an appeal process under the ERISA statute for your employee to appeal, and they have to meet the time deadlines. So
mm,
your employee needs to be following the ERISA rules and regulations and timely appeal. But, you should be on the phone with your agent. I mean, employers such as both of us are rare that we pay for 100% of our group insurance and want our employees to be covered. What's frustrating, I think, for both of us is the lack of transparency, the
hmm
lack of honesty, the lack of let's do what's right for our policyholder employee patients, as opposed to what is this in terms of our profit, my bonus equation.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're becoming disillusioned with the whole, insurance industry right now. And I think a big part of what needs to happen, and I don't mind fair competition in the work. And, I own a business. I'm okay with capitalism, but I think there also has to be a fair playing field, like you were saying. We need to break up the monopolies. We can't let insurance companies dictate medical decisions for doctors. And I think doctors need to be in charge of the doctor stuff, and insurance
Right.
companies need to be in charge of the insurance stuff. And, neither shall cross. And so
I
I
absolutely
don't
agree.
think, yeah. So I think, if we break up some of the monopolies and we stop allowing them to have, full control of the entire process from, having pharmaceuticals to, that we have to have different companies owning each of these, and those companies cannot be owned by one, common person or entity, that gets to dictate the decisions and own the whole process. That's not fair.
So my origin is I was a workers' comp attorney for many years. I still am a
Uh-huh.
workers' comp attorney. And I did a lot of lobbying, writing legislation and rules. And one of the things that I learned, much to my surprise, is that, at least in the state of Florida, in the rate making process, the insurance company's profit was actually built into the rate.
Really?
Yes. So you and I would love, as employers, to be able to quote a price that a person has to pay for because they have to have the insurance that
Right.
includes our profit. I'll sign up for that one every day.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and I think, if we can get somebody, our legislators to start making a difference, on the foundation of how companies are run, set laws in place where if you own an insurance company, any entity that you're affiliated with cannot also own a pharmaceutical company, and cannot also own a drugstore, and cannot also own a hospital, and cannot also own anything that is affiliated, with the process. But yeah, the, workers' comp is one where I feel like, for an employer, we've thankfully only had a couple of workers' comp claims in the 10 years that I've owned the business. But in doing so, it's a pretty cumbersome process.
Yes.
And they make it very challenging to collect anything. And then they really punish the employers.
Yes. And it goes both ways. Uh,
Hmm.
I represent a lot of self-insured employers, municipalities, hospitals, large employers, but I've also represented injured employees. So I've seen in my career both sides of the fence, if you will. And there are problems for both players. And in fact, there shouldn't be problems with players. We know there are bad actors. There are bad actors on
Hmm.
the employer side. There are bad actors on the employee side. But that
Hmm.
doesn't mean you throw everybody into a big pot and
Right.
treat everybody the same. So again, I've written a lot of legislation, done a lot of work with legislators, and honest to goodness, I could tell you, you could put a lawyer, two lawyers on opposite sides of the fence in an elevator, and we could go up to the top floor and we could tell you what the solution to all these problems were. But then you throw into this elevator all of the people who have an interest, and what is a simple solution becomes nothing.
Yeah. Everybody feels like they need to win, right? Like their side needs to win. And, there's a book that I love called Never Split the Difference.
Oh yes.
And I absolutely love this book, but one of the things that I find really interesting is, we can all come out of this and we're not all fighting for the same thing. When we're negotiating a contract, there are things in that contract that really matter to me, but not everything really matters to me.
Right.
Like you can't say everything matters. It doesn't, because then you're never going to walk away feeling like you actually won, right? Because you can't get everything you want and then the other person gets nothing that they want. That doesn't work, right? Because that fractures relationships.
Yeah, there's a good book called Getting to Yes. It's an old book. As
Okay.
a lawyer, what I did is I took a mediation class and could have
Okay.
become a mediator. I didn't do that because I wanted to be a better litigator. I wanted to understand better how I could, because I have to mediate cases,
Yeah.
uh, how how I could approach the other side to create a win-win situation without losing the things that were important to my client or to me in the
Mhm.
course of the mediations. So for what it's worth, read Getting to Yes, and even think about taking a mediation class, because I think it will make you a better negotiator.
I did take a yeah, I'm actually a certified mediator, so I did that a while ago. But it's one of the reasons is because, I want to be able to go to a table and negotiate properly without feeling like I'm burning bridges every time I get to the table. So, I think it's really important that you're being mindful of what is it that matters to the other person. There was I in my previous life before having this company, I owned a travel agency and we did like meeting planning and when I would go negotiate like a meeting contract, like let's just say I was, I was looking for meeting space in hotel rooms for a convention, I would go to the hotel and I would say, look, these three things are really important to my client. And then, I would hear from the hotel, okay, but I can't change like our RevPAR, which is, revenue per available room. So our RevPAR has to be this, or else it takes us out of the class of hotels that we're in. So, for example, a Ritz-Carlton needs to stay in the Ritz-Carlton's group, right? So the Four Seasons and St. Regis. So they need to stay in that class of rate. So they have to maintain a certain rate in order to maintain that class, or else they're breaking out and they're having to compete against the Hiltons and the Marriotts and so forth. And so rate integrity is really important to them. But for my client, it doesn't matter. Okay, so they'll pay a little bit more on the rate, but then we'll negotiate free meeting space, a reduced food and beverage. At the end of the day, they're still getting what they want in terms of a lower overall contract price, but the hotel's being able to maintain the rate integrity that they need.
Cool. Well, you know how to negotiate. And, life is a series of negotiations. And so as strange as it may sound, I think people should read books about mediation and negotiation.
Yeah.
We negotiate with our husband who's going to cook dinner. We negotiate with our kids, sort of, so
Yeah.
we live in a transactional world that involves negotiation. And so I think everyone should be taking some basic mediation or negotiation skills classes.
I wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree with you. So, do you find that most of your cases go to trial or do they get settled out of court when it comes to that?
It depends on the nature of the case. In the Social Security world, if their claims get denied at the first or second stage, we have to go to a hearing. And those cases, at that stage, will go to a hearing in terms of ERISA disability because of that get out of jail card discretionary clause. Depending on where you're at, it's very hard to win. So a lot of those cases get resolved. In workers' comp, it just kind of, depends on what the issues are and, who the parties are, who the judges are. So again, it's case dependent, it's fact dependent, it's judge dependent, it's insurance company dependent. All of those things will factor in. But, at any time, I always prepare my cases as if I'm going to trial.
Mm-hmm.
And if they settle, that's great. If they don't settle, then I'm ready to go to trial. So that's my approach.
Do you find that it's more beneficial for your clients if you go to trial versus not go to trial, or is it a case by case basis?
It's a case by case basis. I mean, I will tell you, I have lost cases that I was positive I was going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Won cases that I was positive I was going to lose.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because you never know what happens at trial. I'm sure people have watched TV trial shows. It doesn't always go like that. It generally doesn't go like that. But, sometimes our clients don't make good witnesses. Sometimes the evidence doesn't come in the way we want. Sometimes we fall in love with our cases when we shouldn't be falling in love with our cases. Sometimes the judge has gotten up on the wrong side of the bed.
Mm-hmm.
So, the beauty of mediation is that you can control the result. You may not be thoroughly happy with the result, but when you go to trial, it's, you throw it up in the air and you don't always know. I mean, part of my job is I'm a legal bookie. I don't know if you know that. A lawyer is going to be looking at a case, looking at the facts, looking at the law, looking at the judge, looking at the opposing counsel. And my job is to say, look, I think you have an X percentage chance of winning. this is what's at stake. This is what the range is to settle this case. What do you want to do? Do you want the certainty of a result that you may not be completely happy with, but you've driven that result? Or do you want to, throw it up in the air? I'm a trial lawyer. I love to try cases. If my client says we're going to try the case, it's like, oh boy, I'm going to have fun. But that's not necessarily my job at the end of the day. My job is to find a result for my client that they can live with. I didn't necessarily say happy, but that they can live with, because litigation is stressful. I love the stress. They don't necessarily love the stress, and they want a certain result. So again, at the end of the day, in most contexts, it's about certainty. In Social Security, I don't get to negotiate generally, except for maybe the period of benefits. It's either I win it or I lose it, and I got to go try it. So again, depends on the court, depends on the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to kind of pivot over to the disability side right now, because I know, disability, ADA is all a really huge thing that we all need to be discussing in the world right now. And my company, we do security and event staffing. So we work in a lot of stadiums and arenas and special events and concerts. And we make all of our employees go through ADA and service animal training, because I want them to be well versed in it. I want them to understand what you can say and what you cannot say. I want them to have a comfortability around, the issues that, our disabled patrons are facing, and to understand, and empathize, so that we can better take care of them. So, where do you see the most need for improvement in that?
Well, I'm not an ADA attorney, but I'm going to answer that question in common sense. In the course of our lives, we meet people of different ethnic groups, different religions, different physical capabilities, different cognitive capabilities. And I think, particularly in the security area, you've got to balance that against your primary function, which is security. Right. And I'm absolutely pleased that you're giving your staff that kind of training. Where I really think the balance needs to be is those who have mental issues, or who have conditions that are not necessarily physically present, like TBI people who have disabilities that you can't see, but yet are functional in terms of physically functional as you start to interact with them, verbally or cognitively. And I think sometimes in the security field, I have seen people jump to conclusions without stepping back and saying, what am I dealing with here? Who am I dealing with? Am I missing something about this particular person and why they're acting the way they are? Balancing that, of course, against your job, your duty to not only the public, but your client, the security concerns. So I would say I would like to see more balance in security companies dealing with people who have emotional or mental impairments. For example, I represent a lot of people who have seizure disorders or neurological disorders. And sometimes people will view them as being combative when in fact that is a manifestation of their condition. So if they have a neurological impairment, you're going to maybe have problems walking, which may lead somebody to think that they're intoxicated.
Right.
They may have slurred speech. That may lead people to think they're intoxicated, when in fact, that's a manifestation of the disease. So I would say if you see something like that, stop a second and think, is there something I'm missing here? And how does that impact my obligation as a security officer?
Absolutely. We really try to be mindful of that, because we deal with, the mass public, in these concerts and sporting events. And I mean, you have thousands of people coming through an event at any given time, and we try our best to accommodate them, but it's a constant education of like, hey, we have 2 other certifications besides the ADA and the service animal training. And one is called sensory inclusion, which is where you learn how to, anyone who has a sensory issue, AD or autism or PTSD, who could be triggered by fireworks or loud bangs or, any kind of laser lights that are going on. So we want to make sure that we know how to properly care for them. You don't just go grab them. That could trigger them more, and then in other circumstances, we do team training, which is techniques in effective alcohol management. And we talk about de-escalation and, understanding the signs of intoxication versus could be a diabetic thing.
Right.
They could be low blood sugar. And so having the same, kind of reactions to things. So you just want to really know what you're looking at. And sometimes it's hard to make those snap judgments when you have thousands of people and you're like, you need to react quickly.
I understand that. And congratulations to you for doing that.
Thank you. But yeah, it's about having the sensitivity to understand that, we don't know what somebody is dealing with. We really don't. And so you have to make the best decision. And I love Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou has a quote, you do the best you can with what you know. And when you know better, you do better. And so we're constantly trying to okay, well, now we know what that looks like. Now we know how to react.
Right. That's fantastic. And I'm sure there's lots of ongoing training that you're doing of your staff.
Yeah, we try. We try. I just feel like there, it's a constantly evolving, just like with law, like with everything. Everything is constantly evolving, and we're just trying to learn to do the best we can, and constantly stay on top of what's out there. So, tell me about a case that you won that you are particularly proud of.
Oh, let me see. Well, I'll give you an example of a case. I do a lot of video, educational video. I post a video a day, and I try to make it disease focused. So I posted a video about a rare visual condition. I got a call from a gentleman in New York. I'm in Florida, and he was a union member, actually working on high rises.
Wow.
And obviously, as his visual impairment got worse, his visual acuity impacted his ability to work, and he didn't want to either get injured or injure his fellow workers. But his union pension required that he get Social Security disability benefits. So he said, look, you're the only lawyer I've seen who has a video about this. I want to talk with you. And we talked, we came up with a strategy. And he said, okay, I'm moving from New York to Florida. And I said, what? You don't need to do that. I can represent you. No. I'm moving to Florida. He moved his whole family to Florida so that he could be close to me.
Wow.
So that I could represent him. Ultimately, we had to go to trial because Social Security, despite his visual issues, denied his claim at step 1 and step 2. Jeez. And when he got to trial, he did a beautiful job. We did a beautiful job. And I had him explain to the judge what it looked like for him to look straight, to the right, to the left, up, down, using examples of like a bottle, what it looked like if you were going to, what he was looking through, as if he was looking through a Coke bottle.
Wow.
So he had lost his visual acuity, but his words told the story that we needed to tell so that the judge looked not only at the what the record said about his loss of visual acuity, but literally in his own mind, his own mind's eye, could see what my client was going through every day with his visual issues. And so to me, that's a perfect example of education, strategy, synergy with your client, and telling your story in a way that's compelling, but consistent with what it is you have to prove to get the disability benefits you deserve. So to me, that's one of the wins I'm most proud of.
That's amazing. Well, I'm sure he's very thankful for you as well. So that's wonderful. So just to pivot again, so who inspires you?
Who inspires me? I'm pretty self-inspired.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So let me give you a format for this. I think of life as an upside down triangle. Okay.
Okay.
At the top of this triangle are principles. In the middle of the triangle are rules, and at the bottom there is decisions. So I have basic principles that I operate on, and from those principles there are rules that govern my behavior. So it makes decision making fairly easy. So Do I need an inspiration? No, not necessarily. I think that I like to see examples of people who have overcome challenges or
Mm.
have insights that I can apply to the way that I live my life, the principles, rules, decision format. So,
I like that. That's very interesting. I like the analogy as well. So that's very good. So you come across as a very powerful, very analytical woman, but I imagine there has been a time that you've given your power away at some point. So can you tell me about a time that you've given your power away?
so I'm going to smile, and I'm going to answer that two ways. I know too many people who don't think they're enough. They have the imposter.
Mhm.
Um, for those who of the audience who have that, I want you to raise your hand, and I am
Mhm.
going to self-appoint you as being more than enough.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Okay? You don't need
Hmm.
anybody to do that, but I've just done it for you. Okay? So you're self-anointed, self-appointed. You are more than what you ever need to be. Now, that kind of leads us into the power issue because people who don't necessarily think that they're an imposter, I think let other people negatively influence their behavior because they don't think they're enough.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. But once you know that you're enough, once you live like you're enough, I think the question is not giving your power away because you are powerful. The question is how you use your power. So I don't ever give away my power, but I modulate my power. What do I mean?
Mm.
In our lives, we're confronted with situations that we can deal with all sorts of emotions, which are powerful emotions. But I'm the one who determines my response to whatever the situation is. I can give my power away to somebody to make a decision for them, but not for me. I can I can listen and give suggestions, which is giving my power or some of my insights to them that they do what they want to do with. So I think the answer to your question is once you recognize that you are powerful and we are all powerful, the question is how you use that power.
Yeah.
So I don't give away my power. I modulate my power based on the circumstances and try to listen calmly, repeat what I hear, and then say, well, have you thought of this or that? Trying to lead people to whatever their powerful solution is, not my powerful solution. So it's leading, not controlling
Yeah,
type.
I love that. So yeah, I do some public speaking, and every time I'm in a room with young women, and I see this with young women, especially early 20s or to early 30s, is anytime I ask them what is the thing that holds you back, and almost 100% of the time I get somebody who says imposter syndrome, and it's just such you feel this like, do I belong in this room? And the answer is always yes. If you are in the room, there's a reason.
That's
Right.
right.
You are in that room for a reason. And so I always say the best thing you can do is add value. If you want to know if you belong in a room, just add value. Even if that adding value is asking a question. Like you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to have all the insight. But if you just ask questions, there's a bunch of other people sitting in that same room who are probably thinking the same thing. And because you had the power to raise your hand and ask a question, I think it just adds a lot of value to the conversation.
There's a fantastic book that I read a number of years ago called Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Max Maltz. Maltz was a plastic surgeon, and he would have people come to him and say, I'm ugly, fix my nose. And so as a plastic surgeon, he would perform the surgery and he would meet the patients post-operatively and he would say, well, how are you doing? And they'd say, I'm still ugly, even though he had fixed their nose. And what he ultimately realized was it was the reason that the people still thought they were quote unquote ugly was their internal vision of
Mm.
that either they had created or others had created for them. So I really would suggest that people, it's an old book, but buy it and read it, because it will, I think, give you some really good insights as to why you think about yourself the way you do.
What is
So
that called again?
it's called Psycho-Cybernetics.
Psycho-Cybernetics. Okay, I'll have to write that one down. I've
Yeah,
got two good book choices now. Suggestions.
Dr. Maltz. The other thing I say to people, people who have the imposter syndrome is, you are more than enough. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But two, what is your vision for your life?
Mm-hmm.
A really good book called Vivid Vision. I hate it, but I love it. I'm sure you, as a business person, have read this book. But really, it's kind of to articulate a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, maybe kind of a lifetime. Where I'm here, but where do I want to be? What is my vision for my life? Because once you know what your vision is, then you can apply the principles, the rules, the decision. And you're doing that in the framework of what's right for you, but not necessarily letting others direct you based on what they think you should be doing, or the expectations they think you should be having of yourself.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, is to, I think the best time to figure out what you want to do is when you're alone. Don't ask anyone else, what do you think I should do? Because then you're following someone else's dreams for you, and you really need to figure that out through introspection and through really understanding, who you are, what you value, and how you want to spend your life. And, I find so many times the biggest career changes are from people who followed somebody else's dream, and then midway through their life, they're like, this isn't what I want to be doing with my life. And so they take a massive 180 and they go into what they actually want to do.
And you made a really good point. Even if you have a vision, life is not a straight line.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
It's okay. And this is for like part of being a lawyer. If the evidence goes the wrong way, I've got to pivot. So
Yeah.
I'm always expecting that I'm going to have to pivot, but I pivot within the dream, or a new dream. But it's always based on this idea of principle, rules, and decisions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The upside down triangle. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
That's a good question. I think that you need to have a sense of self,
Mm-hmm.
which I had. Um, I sort of knew where I was going. It wasn't straight. It was kind of zigzaggy. I think the primary piece of advice that I have for people is that at different points in your lives, there are going to be people who may come into your lives for 30 minutes or be there the rest of your lives, who will make a difference, change your worldview, give you support, give you inspiration. As I said, they may not be there long in your life, but the impact that they have. And so I can name a number of people in my life who have made differences at every stage of the case, and have said to me something that challenged my thinking or my vision.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that don't expect that you're going to know everything. Look for people, mentors, who you can trust to have your best interest, but measure what they're saying to you in terms of principle, rules, and the decision-making process. If it doesn't sound right, it probably isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, life's not straight. Have a vision. I would say have people who can be mentors to you or inspirations to you, or who can show you the wrong way to do things, uh, and um, and just always live by whatever your principles are. And that's I think I learned all of that when I was about 18 because of what I had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But I've gotten better at it. There were times when, I didn't do the stuff I should have been doing, but because I got off track. But it was always, well, I'm off track. I need to get myself back on track. And this is what I need to do. Or I need
Mm-hmm.
to talk to somebody
Yeah.
and say, here am I at? Here am I at? What should I do? Give me the pros, give me the cons.
Yeah. Really good advice. And I agree, just Having a great foundation is really, really important. And one of the things that you said in there really stuck out to me, and it was about, learning from other people's mistakes. One of my clients has something on their wall, and it's a quote, and I love this quote, but it says, smart people learn from their mistakes, but the smartest people learn from other people's mistakes.
Right.
And that's a really, really good way to put it because, I can be stubborn. Sometimes somebody will tell me, hey, if you do this, X will happen. And I don't believe them and I do it anyway. And of course, it's a horrible learning lesson, but I try to do the same thing with my son. I don't think you should do this. This is what's going to happen. And he has to learn for himself. But I think he's learning now. It's a lot less expensive and traumatic when you learn from other people's mistakes.
Right. I mean, you made a really good point, and that is a mistake isn't a mistake if you've learned something from it.
Yes.
It's a learning lesson. And
Yes.
that's how I think people need to think about it. But if you make the mistake again, then no.
Then it's a choice. Yeah. Anything after the first mistake is a choice, is what I say. So this has been really insightful. So where can people find all of this great information that you have out there?
Well, we have a YouTube channel. It's the Cavey Law channel. My website, Cavey Law.
Okay.
Podcast is specific to ERISA disability. It's called Winning Isn't Easy. We're going to be launching, I think next month, a Social Security disability podcast. Also Winning Isn't Easy, the Social Security version. So I'm all over the place. So you shouldn't have time finding me.
All right, very good. And you can also find Nancy on the prettypowerfulpodcast.com. So this has been really insightful, and I've just learned a ton, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I have one more question for you. What do you wish more people knew?
I wish people knew that they have inner strength and inner character. And that they need to see themselves as being a human who makes mistakes, but who can learn, but the ability to do those things and needs to do those things without all of the chatter that's around them. What's on your phone, what's on your computer. I think that reflection, solitude, treating yourself with respect are the really key foundations to forming a happy and healthy life.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Well, thank you so much again, Nancy. It's been a true pleasure, and wishing you incredible success with everyone that you're out there helping and fighting the good fight. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. Wishing everybody a tremendously successful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time. And until then, step into your own power.